no mail-in ballots, you know, corrupt mail-in ballots. We're the only country in the world that does it that way, corrupt as hell. We're the only country that does mail-in voting. Mail-in voting means mail-in cheating. I call it mail-in cheating. That's what they're good at. They're professional cheaters. No mail-in ballots, right? We don't want to have mail-in ballots where they're mailed in from all parts of the place. Mail-in ballots are crooked as hell. Mail-in ballots make it automatically corrupt. If you have mail-in ballots, automatically it's correct. The cheating on mail-in voting is legendary. It's horrible what's gone on. And it's very clearly covered, very, very clearly. So I think this will help a lot with elections.
Hi again, everybody. I can't unhear Laura Ingraham wondering if Trump is able to, quote, take things in when he's briefed. It's now 5 o'clock in New York. Einstein's theory of relativity suggests faster than light travel is impossible. But you honestly never know that today, observing the sheer speed with which pro-democracy forces are mustering their legal might, setting land speed records on their way to courthouses all across our country to challenge Donald Trump's latest, perhaps most egregious, least authorized attempt to assert control over America's system of elections. It has to do with what you just heard him rail against over the course of many months after complaining about it over the course of many years. That is mail-in voting, an essential arm of what has been the safest, most secure, used to be Republican-dominated way of voting in democratic elections that our planet has ever known. Yesterday, absent any evidence and explicit constitutional authority over elections, Trump signed an executive order that the New York Times points out appears difficult to enforce. Times writes this, quote, it directs the Department of Homeland Security to create a state citizenship list based on data from citizenship and naturalization records, Social Security records, and other federal databases. That order directs federal officials to send the list to state election officials and orders the Attorney General to prioritize prosecution of election officials who provide federal ballots to ineligible voters. It also directs the U.S. Postal Service not to transmit mail-in or absentee ballots from any individual not included on the state citizenship list. Again, if it sounds sketchy or illegal or unconstitutional to you, then you have something in common with a significant portion of the country's legal community. Perhaps that's why Donald Trump sought to frame it like this. I don't know how it can be challenged. You'll probably challenge it. You may find a rogue judge. You get a lot of rogue judges, very bad people, very bad judges. But that's the only way that can be changed, and hopefully we'll win an appeal if it is. But I don't see how anybody can challenge it. I don't see how they can challenge it. And remember, it's about voter integrity. I love these showing and telling us at the same time. Now, whether or not Trump can see how anybody could challenge his new order is immaterial. It has been challenged. It is being challenged, and for good reason. In the end, though, it is another example of Donald Trump in a rather transparent effort to cut down on non-existent voter fraud, throwing you-know-what at the wall to see what sticks. And sure, people fighting it can win. They can clean this up. And it will be thanks to the tireless efforts of the pro-democracy legal community. But that doesn't mean it doesn't leave a mark. It's where we begin the hour with voting rights attorney and founder of Democracy Docket, Mark Elias. And with me for the hour, my friend and colleague, senior contributing editor Michelle Norris. Mark Elias, the lack of constitutional authority, the lack of a problem that this sort of so-called solution aims to fix doesn't feel like the point. It feels like this is another machination along the path of discrediting our elections and throwing up hurdles to free and fair elections.
Yeah, I wrote recently that, Donald Trump doesn't so much flood the zone, as people say, is he tries to grind us down. And he has been trying to grind us down about elections and grind us down about trusting mail-in voting now for, the better part of a decade. And this is just the latest effort to do that. Now, this is a major escalation. I'm sort of wondering where in all of the analysis of what Donald Trump is doing, when are people going to point to the oath of office that he took when he put his hand hovering over a Bible, not touching it, but hovering over it, and said that he would uphold the Constitution? Where is the analysis that he is disregarding his constitutional obligation to take care of the laws are faithfully executed. I mean, the fact is, he has already been told after his first effort to pass a executive order that my law firm and we sued and we won, that the president has no role. That's the words that a federal judge used, not a rogue judge, a federal judge, in describing the role of the president. And yet here he is back, claiming powers he does not have, asserting authority he does not have, claiming powers, frankly, over the U.S. Postal Service that he doesn't have. And so we need to recognize that what he is doing right now is not just unconstitutional. It is a violation of his oath. It is a violation of his obligation as president, and every Republican who's going along with him is giving him cover. But as you say, most dangerously, it is an effort to grind us down, to make us give up in believing that we can have free and fair elections. Well, I'm not giving up. I'm getting ready to sue him, and I'm getting ready to win.
Mark, is it even about mail-in voting? I mean, Trump votes by mail. What is it about?
It's not about mail-in voting. I mean, look, he's creating a list of citizens that are eligible to voting, and by definition, excluding people who he says are not eligible to vote. You know, it used to be, you remember, Nicole, it used to be Republicans who said, we don't want a national list of every citizen, right? It was the Republicans that said, we don't trust the federal government to compile a list of who is in good favor and who is out of good favor. And once you buy into the idea that the federal government is doing that, if you think it ends with mail-in voting, you are mistaken. If you think it ends with in-person voting, you are mistaken. This is an effort by Donald Trump to create a list of who can be considered a full citizen for a whole bunch of rights. He will start with mail-in voting. It will then be used to disenfranchise not just by mail, but in person. It'll then be used in a whole host of ways. And so, you know, this is a very, very dangerous point. Yes, it's going to be used to disenfranchise. Yes, it's going to try to be used to steal the 2020 election. It'll be used to try to discredit it when Republicans lose. It'll be tried to use to claim that there were such irregularities that Donald Trump needs to seize ballots and take over who won and lost. But you know what? Tyranny never ends with just the object closest on the horizon. It has all kinds of applications further on.
I mean, I may be totally too many moons removed from Republican politics, but Republicans used to be unable to win elections, especially off-year elections, without mail-in voting. What happens to I mean, are you aware of any effort to build that vote up somewhere else, or is this all about rigging the game?
Look, I mean, the Donald Trump's playbook is not, as you say, about mail-in voting versus in-person voting versus early voting versus election day voting, right? I mean, what they want to do is they want to constrict the franchise. They want to limit who can vote. They want to be able to have the discretion to decide who can vote. They want their Department of Homeland Security, their Department of Justice to be the person who calls balls and strikes on whether a voter gets to vote or not vote. And I always come back to this. You know, they say that, you know, they want birth certificates to prove citizenship. Barack Obama produced his birth certificate, and Donald Trump still told a lie that he wasn't born in the United States. So, like, it's not about this document or this method of voting or that method of voting. Fundamentally, Donald Trump wants to do, as he said, he wants to be in control of who tabulates and counts ballots. And so, like, if you want to rig the outcome of an election, no better way to do it than you get to decide who gets to vote, and then you get to decide which votes count and which votes get discarded. And there are just far too few people, and this is why I'm so frustrated. There are far too few people on the good side who just recognize this is not politics as usual. This is not just the usual, you know, back and forth between parties. This is an existential threat to democracy because you have an authoritarian who wants to try to drive the outcome of the election.